Welcome back to Columbus State University, University Hall here on the campus for our live coverage of the WRBL News 3's Republican gubernatorial runoff debate. I'm News 3's Phil Scoggins. WCUG Radio's Matthew Tessier has our next question. It goes to Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Matthew?
Secretary Kemp, with the Trump administration's reversal of many Obama-era policies, a lot of environmentalists are worried that the progress that we've made in that area will slow down or stop. If you're elected governor, what will you do to protect Georgia's land, air, and water?
Well, I would say that, first of all, I support what the president has been doing to cut government regulations. Here again, he is upholding his word to the American people to cut government regulations, get it out of the way of business so that our economy can thrive. And our economy, quite honestly, has never been better. So I would certainly like to congratulate the president on that. And I'm going to continue to do, as far as state government, exactly what I've done in the Secretary of State's office. I ran and promised people that I would make our office more efficient, that I would cut government regulations, that I would streamline government. We've done that in all different phases, from our award-winning corporations division, our new voter registration system, which is saving millions of dollars and is more efficient. And that's what I think we need to be looking at in state government. Now, certainly we're going to protect the environment, but in my opinion, we have too many regulations right now, and I want to make it fewer.
Mr. Cagle?
Well, I applaud the president for the work that he is doing, and I think that he fundamentally understands the balance that is required in terms of economic growth and prosperity, but also protecting our water as well as our environment as a whole. And I applaud him for that. Although I will tell you that balance has not always been true with my opponent. A 25-foot additional buffer that was required when he was in the state Senate that he not just campaigned on, but also put in legislation. I will tell you that that is a taking without compensation, and we need a governor who will stand firm on property right issues.
Jessalyn Adams, you have the next question for Mr. Cagle.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle, you've recently had a hand in appointing Senator Ed Harbison as chair of a study committee to create a scratch-off lottery game that would benefit Georgia veterans. What else will you do as governor to support our vets?
Well, our veterans are very important, and I have a long record of being there for them. Certainly those enlisted men and women here at the Fort Benning. We have offered choice for schools, which is very important as well. But also the latest thing that I have stated is to make Georgia more economically friendly to our veterans and the enlisted personnel. Their retirement income will be exempt from state income tax under a Cagle governorship. And what this will fundamentally do is it will encourage them not just to stay here, but to continue in a contract way so we can harness that great talent that they have in order to keep building this economy even to a greater level.
Secretary Kemp?
Well, we certainly have a great record in the Secretary of State's office of supporting our active duty military and our veterans, as well as Guard and others. Creating, number one, the electronic ballot delivery, where we can now send ballots electronically to military and overseas voters, which speeds up the absentee voting process by half. We also created a free mobile app where not only can you register to vote, but those same soldiers and their families can track their ballot to make sure it gets back and it gets counted, giving them a peace of mind. We have hired a military liaison to help every base in the state and all those veterans and active duty folks with things like licensing issues to speed up the process and voting issues. And part of my plan to strengthen rural Georgia is to protect our military bases, and everyone knows how important that is here.
Dr. Combs, question for Secretary Kemp.
You intend to expand the Firearms Industry Non-Discrimination Act, which prevents financial institutions from discriminating against gun manufacturers. You also support the rights of private business to refuse service on the basis of their religious convictions. And in this debate, you mentioned that it's not the role of government to tell private companies how to conduct their business. Is this a double standard? Why is it okay for one business to take what they feel is a moral stand, but not another?
Well, I don't think it's a double standard at all. If you look at current law, the same law, the law that's in place now already says that to financial institutions. So this would just include the processors in the financial institution. So this is nothing new. This is making sure that all people are treated equally that are these small business owners and working Georgians. So I do not see that as a double standard with something that's already in practice.
Mr. Cagle?
I strongly support the fact that we have such a robust gun manufacturing industry here in our state, along with ammunition. And I don't think that it is right for the federal government, which has been the practice under Obama, to basically discriminate and say that they are a risky business when they are protected under the law. And we will continue to obviously advocate for those individuals. And I think that that's important. And what was stated earlier about the veterans and being strong with them. But I will also tell you, turning 6 million voters information, public-private information or private confidential information over under Secretary Kemp's watch is not doing a good job.
Matthew, you have the next question for Lieutenant Governor Cagle.
Medical marijuana has been shown to provide relief to patients suffering from conditions like multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, and veterans suffering from PTSD. A new Georgia law has expanded the legal use of medical cannabis. If you're elected governor, will you continue this trend of decriminalizing and legalizing cannabis?
Well, I'm proud of the record in which we have on the issue of cannabis oil and the impact that it is having for so many of our children with the autism as well as seizure disorders and many other areas that we've expanded that in. And it's a fundamental belief for me, and that is that we need the patient and the doctor working hand in hand to ensure that they're getting the type of treatment and medication by which they need. And I will continue to be at the table. I think the Medical Composite Board needs to be the entity by which ultimately regulates that and takes the politics out of the process, and I will continue to advocate. We have a study committee to look at obviously how they can get that safe and sound, but I am not in favor under any circumstances for recreational marijuana use in the state of Georgia.
Secretary Kemp?
Well, I certainly support as well what's been done to help children in our state with many terrible illnesses, diseases, and other things that are going on. So I'm very sympathetic to that. I do think there's much work to be done, quite honestly, at the federal level. There also needs to be clinical trials done. One of the things that I have learned is that there's really no medical data, or not much of it, that actually proves from a medical standpoint and a physician standpoint what's actually working or not. Now, I'm very sympathetic to the parents when they're saying this is working for my child, and as a father, I would certainly be doing the same thing myself, so I understand that. But I think under the current regulatory environment that we're in Georgia, that really makes it impossible to do cultivation, and I'm absolutely opposed to recreational marijuana as well.
Jesselyn, next question for Secretary Kemp.
Secretary Kemp, Alabama Governor Kate Ivey has recently signed an order creating the Alabama Century program, which would arm some school administrators. What are your thoughts on that program, and would you aim to enact something similar in Georgia schools?
Well, I am for local control when it comes to our school system, whether that's educational policy or arming teachers. I trust the local school boards and the local communities to make that decision. We've had some in Georgia that have decided to go that route, and I support them. We have others that are not wanting to go that route, that want to just simply harden our schools with the way kids come into schools and how they're checked while they're through doing that process. Others are securing the border on the whole campus, if you will. I support that. I think it starts with local control. As somebody that's the chief elections official for our state, I know that every voting precinct in our state is different. Every county elections office is different. They're dealing with different issues. That's certainly the case with our schools. And I think in many other areas of education, we have too many state government mandates and too many federal mandates. We need to trust our local educators, our administrators, our local school boards, and our parents to decide what's best for the local community, and I'll be a governor that will do that.
Mr. Cagle?
Well, as Lieutenant Governor, I can tell you that all of us have watched the news and we have seen the school safety concerns that are out there, and it is very hurtful to watch. But I can tell you in Georgia, we are very committed to ensuring that we're giving local schools all the resources by which they need. And for those that want and elect to certainly provide the opportunity for teachers to be trained in a way to use those guns, certainly that is their prerogative. They have that right now. But we've got to have a school safety program that every school puts in place all across the state. Doesn't have to be uniform, but they have to come with a very clear way so our parents are ensured that we're doing all that we can to keep our kids safe.
Dr. Combs, you have the next question for Lieutenant Governor Cagle.
Your website mentions that you were, quote, outraged at the news of a Georgia high school athlete being disqualified from competition for wearing a headband with a Bible verse written on it, and that you find it simply unacceptable to discriminate against students who are expressing sincere religious beliefs in a way that is protected by state and federal constitutional law, end quote. Would you support a Georgia high school student wearing a headband with a verse from the Quran?
Well, that was an issue that I took on, and obviously we were successful in doing so. I don't think that it is right to discriminate against an individual for wearing a headband. And if it has a religious phrase on it or the Quran, they have that right to do so, and I support that. But you know, no different than if they have the Nike swoosh. They have the ability and should to be able to exercise that. It is important that we stand up for our value system. And I do think that the liberal media, along with this bias, continues to be pushing very hard against conservatives. And I want to make sure that we have the right balance. And as governor, I can promise you, I'm going to govern with a value system that is true to Georgia. And I'm going to make certain that we're also creating greater economic opportunity in the context of creating more jobs where people can have great abilities to make a living. But we can't do that at the sacrifice of our value system.
Secretary Kemp?
Well, I certainly support that student as well and their ability to express their religious freedom and their religious values and certainly their liberty. But this race is about who do you trust? Who do you actually trust to fight on this issue? I have a record of fighting the left, standing up and suing the Obama Justice Department twice to implement our citizenship check when we register people to vote, defending our photo ID law, taking on Stacey Abrams and the liberal George Soroses of the world that try to target Georgia and take away the things that we believe in, like doing list maintenance on our voter registration system to keep our rolls secure, to protect our elections, standing up to them when they tried to overturn the presidential election, when Donald Trump got elected, and when Karen Handel got elected to Congress. So what we need is somebody that you can trust to not only be for these issues, but to actually fight for them, and I have a record of doing that.
Ashley Bridges, next question for the Secretary Kemp, please.
Secretary Kemp, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported this week that Georgia is on pace to double the number of fatal police-involved shootings in 2018 as compared to 2017. For your reference, their review of records showed that 30 people were shot and killed by police officers in 2017. Georgia is just one shy of matching that total for 2018 as of this week. A GBI official, when questioned about that number, said it was a perfect storm of anti-police sentiment combined with drug use and mental health issues, and also previously referenced the abundance of arms available in Georgia. As governor of Georgia, what would you do to both curb that trend and also to support better relationships between police officers and those troubled communities that they may serve?
Well, I would just say this to the AJC. They had a huge article about this, but also about street gangs in Georgia. And they failed to mention that I have a plan to stop and dismantle street gangs because it's gotten so out of control. The legislature 8 years ago passed legislation creating the street gang database, but they never funded it to where we could actually use it and be able to track street gang members, know what they're doing, where they're doing it. There's tens of thousands of them in Georgia. They're in every community around our state. And they are creating this environment, along with the loss of our values like religious freedom in our schools, that are creating young kids shooting people like it's nobody's business now. And I think that's driving what's targeting to police as well. I'm certainly going to be a governor that's going to support communication in the local communities, but we've also got to send people a message that we are not going to stand for people, even if they are 14 or 15 years old, that are shooting police officers or their fellow classmates.
Mr. Cagle.
Have to be firm in supporting our local law enforcement officers. They are the ones that keep us safe, and sadly enough, they are too easily second-guessed in every decision by which they make. There's a pay issue that we've got to be focused on to ensure that they're getting adequate compensation for what they do, but also mental health enters into this, and certainly there's no doubt that we have to do a better job, and that's why we put more money in the budget this year to do so. But we also need to recognize that we have to hold our local law enforcement and communities accountable, just like with Decatur when they violated the sanctuary city law by saying to their local law enforcement officers that if you pull someone over that has a federal detainer, you are not to communicate and cooperate with ICE. That's wrong. I took them to an administrative court, and that's where we're going to continue to do.
Jesselyn, you have the next question for Mr. Cagle.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle, at an event here in Columbus last week, when asked about Medicaid expansion, you said, quote, "I believe in a safety net for society, but I don't believe the safety net needs to become a hammock," end quote. How would you reform programs like Medicaid and CHIP that 1.8 million Georgians depend on?
Well, obviously, my plan going forward is to continue to create a rising tide. I don't believe in a safety net that becomes a hammock. I believe in a springboard. And by giving more choice and more options to our kids in high school, they can earn the right kind of career path, or see the right kind of career path that leads them to a remarkable income, and also with benefits. And I'm going to be focused like a laser to build that workforce, along with ensuring that we have an adult retraining program that gets people off of gaming the system and gets them back to work, and I'll commit to that. My opponent, however, when he campaigned for the state senate, did something called Kemp Care, which would actually increase Medicaid expansion to 185%. That is the wrong thing. I've stood and fought against Obamacare, and I'll continue to do that.
Mr. Kemp?
Well, again, Pinocchio over here is lying about my record, and I'll be glad to address that. But listen, he's the guy in the race that was for Medicaid expansion, and now he's against it because all the other candidates in the race at the time called him out on that. But we also have got to understand that throwing more government money at a failed program is not going to work. You know, we cannot continue to do that. What the problem is we have the special interests that are backing my candidate that are holding up private sector solutions that will lower cost. But we have absolutely got to do, like I said earlier, is make sure that we have economic opportunities in all parts of our state. That's why I've been focused on that, focusing on strengthening rural Georgia, because that's what changes being able to support our individuals that are out there that need health care.
Dr. Combs, you have the next question for Secretary Kemp.
With President Trump set to nominate a new Supreme Court justice, it's possible Roe v. Wade will be overturned during the next governor's tenure. If that is the case, would you support a ban on all abortions without exception, or are there circumstances where you support legal access to abortion?
Well, I think we need to expand the pro-life movement. I have a strong record on being a pro-life conservative. You can certainly check that record when I was in the legislature, voting for many issues that got held up in the House at the time because the Democrats still control the House. I have said before that I will support a heartbeat bill. I'll also support a bill that's even more restrictive than the Iowa bill, going to as far as the legislature will go, and I will sign that. I think we have got to protect life. I've been endorsed and supported by many pro-life groups, the Policy Family Foundation and others, and that is what I will do as governor.
Mr. Cagle.
I believe in life, and I believe very strongly that we need to do everything within our power to protect that. Government should not be stepping in and creating mechanisms by which, sadly enough, an innocent life can be taken. My wife and I were instrumental in early on starting a crisis pregnancy center in Gainesville. This is not something that we're new to the game to. This was even before I got into politics. I believe we should take every step possible to do what we can to protect life, and that will be the way I will govern as governor.
Gentlemen, we're going to take another brief break at this time, but stay with us as the 2018 Republican gubernatorial runoff debate continues here at Columbus State University.